Tranquility du Jour, April 29th, 2019. Bask in a day-long masterclass for living life with more tranquility, creativity, and style while noshing at a world-renowned plant-based restaurant. Mingle with other members of the TDJ community and dream big. Join us for TDJ Soirée, June 9th in Washington, D.C. Limited spots remain. Learn more at KimberlyWilson.com/soiree. Hello there, this is Kimberly Wilson, and welcome to the 453rd edition of Tranquility du Jour. Today I'm chatting with Jane Reeves about the practice of loving kindness, her book, A Heart of Gold, her passion for Italy, yoga, and more. For those of you new to Tranquility du Jour, you can learn more in the show notes, KimberlyWilson.com/453. We've been doing this podcast since 2005, interviewing artists, activists, and authors making a difference around the world, with occasional musings by me thrown in and lots of snoring pugs also happening. Also, for those of you who are interested, you can join my mailing list to learn more about Tranquility du Jour and to get a little dose of tranquility and love to your inbox on a regular basis. That's again at KimberlyWilson.com/453. You will find a link to that and everything we're discussing here today. A big thank you to those of you who came out to yesterday's Pigs, Pugs, and Pinot event. It was our very first one at a wine bar. And you may be familiar, Pigs and Pugs Project is my nonprofit I'm the president of, and I've got two other amazing board members, and we pulled together this really, really sweet, fun event. And I want to thank so many of you for coming out and supporting it. It was sold out. We raised $1,299 for Pigs and Pugs, and we'll be donating it to Life with Pigs Farm Sanctuary in Williamsburg. And he brought up his beloved little Charlotte, who we got to meet, Charlotte the potbelly pig. And then we'll also be donating to a pug rescue in need. So you can find out more about that this week over at pigsandpugsproject.org. Our next event is Yoga and the Animals, and that is our 4th annual, happening on June 8th at Burleigh Manor Animal Sanctuary, just an hour outside of Washington, D.C. So even if you're not local, we've had people come down for this event from New Jersey and Delaware and Pennsylvania. So would love, love, love to have you with us. And the fun thing is the next day is the TDJ Soirée, which is my first day-long event ever. All about Tranquility du Jour, but my first day long happening in 10 years. So with that said, I don't know when the next one will be, and this one is going to be super duper special. We have people coming in from Colorado, LA, New York, and of course the whole DC metropolitan area. We have less than half of the tickets left, so if you'd like to join, you can find out more at KimberlyWilson.com/soiree. And the beneficiary of the event, of course, is Pigs and Pugs Project, and it's happening at the number 6 veg-friendly restaurant in the entire freaking world, which is this beautiful 1880s townhome, Federalist style, just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful here in Washington, D.C. So you can find out more in the show notes. Now, our next live gathering that will be free and virtual is TDJ Live on June 23rd. So be sure to save the dates. And that's at 8 p.m. and it usually runs 8 to 9 p.m. on a Sunday night. Also, if you would like to escape to Tuscany with me in July, and this will be my last Italy retreat for a couple of years, and we have 4 spots left. Wonderful experience. We'll be doing yoga, creativity, and mindfulness. Oh, and a day trip to Cinque Terre, which is freaking stunning. So I'd love to have you with us, and you can find out more of that also in the show notes. And those of you who live up in Montreal or that part of the woods, I would love to see you. I'm going to be there September 21st and 22nd, helping out with your advanced teacher training. And I'll be teaching about creativity, how to include creativity in your teaching. But of course, it's open to everyone. The business of yoga and also mindfulness and how to teach it and how to incorporate it. So again, you can find all this over at KimberlyWilson.com. Now, without further ado, Jane. Jane is an author, retreat leader, and life coach. Over the past 3 decades, she has been seeking authentic ways to develop a practice that brings more light, love, and joy into the world. In her one-on-one coaching session, she helps people dive deep into the practices of loving kindness, applying ancient and modern teachings to encourage spiritual work, life design, and meeting wellness aspirations. She helps people to listen to their heart's desires and to embrace the path they are on in the present moment. She also leads sacred yoga retreats in Italy, where she offers the opportunity to experience rich restoration through yoga and meditation while being surrounded by beauty. Her book, A Heart of Gold, is the culmination of a lifetime of teachings and personal practice of loving kindness. From one heart of gold to another, A Heart of Gold is a gift from Jane to her students and retreaters, a resource for staying the course on the path of loving kindness. Welcome, Jane.
Hello.
So congratulations on your book, A Heart of Gold, Lessons on the Path of Loving Kindness.
Thank you. I'm really proud of it, and also really, I can't even believe that I finished it.
It's a process, right?
It really is. I think there's so much said about how to write a book, and there's a lot of online resources to guide one to write a book, but until you actually dive in, as you know, it's so customized for each person, and it's so personal.
Absolutely. And I just feel so blessed in having a wonderful graphic designer that just brings it to life. But yeah, it's one of those things where there's so much to it, from the layout to the cover, to the back cover, to the photos. It's like, it is a process.
It's huge. I didn't realize the back end piece of it. I was always under the impression that it was going to be the actual writing of the book itself. And that is, obviously a labor of love. But yes, then when the book is finished, there's all these beautiful moments of creating the art and creating the font and the color and styling the book. And I actually enjoyed that as much as I did writing the book itself.
Yeah. It is a really fun part, because once you've put all your blood, sweat, and tears into the writing and the editing and what have you, and it's ready for layout, then it's like, oh my goodness, it just becomes so pretty.
It does. And there's so many ways you could go with the cover of a book. I wanted A Heart of Gold to be really soft and really beautiful, and to reflect the colors and the vibrations that I feel when I'm in Italy. And so the cover of A Heart of Gold is actually, it's an artist rendering of a photograph of an olive branch from one of my Italy retreats.
Oh, I love it. It is very soft. It is. It definitely is.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you.
So tell us a little bit about your journey with loving kindness. I mean, writing an entire book about loving kindness, which tends to be, a practice that we'll do sometimes in a meditation class or on a meditation retreat. So to have a whole book dedicated to us, tell us about this journey.
Yes. So I came to the path of loving kindness pretty wholeheartedly right around 2000. Even though I had been sort of leaning toward that, I would say all of the 90s, I started studying, Eastern religions, and I started studying different wisdom practices. And I just kept circling back to loving kindness as the roots of where I wanted to grow my spiritual practice. And so when I realized that I wanted to write a book about it, I guess what I was looking at just societally and culturally is that I feel like right now we, like you said, we just kind of dip into it in a class, and maybe we kind of think about it as an aspiration or something that might be a good idea. But I wanted to really encourage people to make it part of daily life. And so the way the book is written, there are lessons, and then there are meditations, and then journal questions. And so I wanted people to be able to not only read the book and sort of dive into what loving kindness actually is and how to practice it, but then how to really sort of dive into their own process about thinking in terms of how can they practice loving kindness toward themselves first, which is, as you know, a really difficult thing to do.
Well, absolutely. And so why don't we start by defining loving kindness for our listeners? I think so many people have an idea of what loving kindness is, but can you give us kind of your definition and how you encourage us to do so?
Absolutely. I think one of the main hallmarks of loving kindness in my creation of this book and in my own practice is compassion. And so it's that word Maitri, which is a Sanskrit word, which sort of embodies friendship and generosity and acts of love. So we're not only thinking about that or aspiring toward that as a person that's living in the world, but we're starting really with ourselves. So we're beginning that process of viewing ourselves with deep compassion and love.
And how do we do that? Because, one of the things that comes up for me with regard to kind of mindful self-compassion and loving kindness, it's, we can be so hard on ourselves, right? We say things to ourselves that we would never say to another human being.
Yes. So we have to lay a foundation for compassion for ourselves. And it really starts with getting to know who we are and what our habits are. So we're taking moments and we're kind of, and the journal questions really trigger, for example, in the practice of meditation I've got in journaling questions on page 24, I say, spend some time writing about what's coming up for you when you meditate. You can write about how your body feels or your general mood. You can journal desires and hopes or write about where you want to allow more loving kindness in your life. And so my idea with that was really giving people permission to actually think about something that they don't normally think about. And that's sort of like opening the door. So when we say how, I mean, it sounds like a good idea, but how do I do it? It really starts with paying attention to who we are, how we behave, what we think, feel, and do. And it's not necessarily an easy path with unicorns along the way. It's quite a dare to live this way and to practice this.
Yeah, this idea of really working to get to know ourselves. You have a whole piece on know thyself to love thyself. And so, for our listeners who are like, I want to practice more swadhyaya, it's like I want to self-study. I want to understand myself more. How do you recommend or encourage people to get started with that?
I think a lot of it has to do with being quiet and being able to be quiet. I think that it's really hard for some people to be quiet and alone and just kind of sit with their thoughts. You've probably experienced this as a yoga and meditation teacher, that people will sit down and try to meditate and they'll say, I can't do it because I don't like to be alone with my thoughts. And so it's not that we're, emphasizing some sort of hardcore practice. It's just we keep coming back to it over and over again as a way of entering into that place where we can really understand our patterns. And I think that's the part about getting to know ourselves and making peace with ourselves that really does open up the door for loving kindness. Because when we reject who we really are, we can't get to that compassionate place.
And how does yoga kind of play into your practices?
So for me, yoga is what keeps me sane in terms of just being able to be in my body and not judge it and not necessarily in a have to sort of a mode. Just to be able to sit in my body in its current condition feels like love to me, because we have these bodies. They're all different. We have problems in our bodies, and we do want to find ways to make peace with that because our bodies are our vehicle. And so I feel like with yoga, it's sort of the intersection of loving kindness practice. In yoga, we really come home to our body and we can really learn to understand how we live in our body with more compassion, as opposed to that sort of negative side talk that's like, especially for women, we have a lot of issues in our bodies as we age and as we go through different life cycles. And I think sometimes we need ways to just be more gentle and tender with who we are as women in our bodies.
And how do you recommend we do that, right? So yoga, definitely a way. It is a practice of, acceptance and understanding and connection to one's body. And, the fact that it's different, every day. But what, how does loving kindness play in toward a sense of acceptance of ourselves, our bodies, our lives?
When we're giving ourselves that sort of full on acceptance of where we're at, we're not saying, oh, when I get here or when I do this or when I feel this way, then I can love myself more. So I feel like with yoga, yoga is like the umbrella for come on in through the door. And I feel like when you come to your yoga practice, because it's got that focus and intention of let yourself be, let yourself relax in your body, you're sort of initiating that process of loving kindness more than you would if you're just driving in your car to the grocery store or getting ready to have an argument with your husband. In yoga, you can really focus on being in the now, on being in your body, in your breath. And these are all places where we can really generate that loving kindness feeling.
And you talk about, towards the back of the book, various ways to practice loving kindness. And I'd like to go through those, and I'll just list them quickly. So creating expansive space, meditation, silence, creativity, listening, writing, gratitude, retreats, and slowness.
Did I write that?
You did. Sometimes isn't it like, ooh, did I really say that?
It's really funny, Kimberly, because those ways at the end, the practices of loving kindness, when I had a moment when I was writing these where I realized that each one of these ways could be a book in and of itself.
Absolutely.
And so, but I didn't want to write a 500-page book on loving kindness. I wanted it to be almost like a field guide.
So let's talk about, creating expansive space. So How do you encourage listeners to do that?
Well, for example, I think we have this super productive kind of cultural milieu that we all live in. And it's like we have to wake up because the whole goal of waking up is moving forward, right? We're just very progressive that way. We want to move forward. It's very competitive. And this is how we're going to be successful and happy. This has become like a habit for all of us. Even those of who are teaching wellness are somewhat caught up in this because we have these businesses and we're online and we're kind of wired to think that if we're not busy all the time, nothing's happening. So when I say creating expansive space, what I mean is we need to take time to slow down and actually appreciate what is happening moment to moment in each day. And that's not going to be an easy thing where we can just sit down at lunch and go, okay, here's what I'm, in appreciation about. It's meaning that we need to take time away, real time away on a regular basis from our ritual and routine of each day, so that we can really deepen the conversation about what we need to become more spacious in our own life. So this is almost like, this is a way that I see is self-love and compassion in action. So we're living more with the intention of paying attention to what it is that we actually want to do with our life, and then creating space to focus in on that and really decide.
It almost sounds a little like essentialism, right? Like getting really in touch with what is it that matters most, that's most important. And so that we do have this sense of spaciousness versus a huge kind of crammed, overwhelmed existence.
Yeah, and I think it's hard too. I think we tend to be impatient because our minds are really busy and we're getting all this data all the time and we're processing and there's so much to look at. And so then we get this drain. And so I feel like when we're curating space for loving kindness, it's almost like our own version of personal care activism. And it's like we have to really take a stand for it. And that includes telling, our close ones, our loved ones in our life, here's what we need space for.
Yeah, I like that. The importance of really making self-care a huge priority with all of this. And that, is the quote that you chose for this piece by Audre Lorde. I have come to believe that caring for myself is not self-indulgent. Caring for myself is an act of survival. I love that quote.
I do too. And I love her and everything she writes. But I think the main point that I wanted to really make in that chapter is that perhaps one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves is time. And we also need time to heal. So I feel like there's a lot of, we're healing every day, right? And we always want to rush through everything. I see this with people when I'm coaching or on retreat. They want to, by day 2, they want to have all the things settled or known or whatever. And so it's like when we give ourselves that time and space, we're actually saying to our inner self, you matter. You really, really matter. And it's time for you.
Yeah, it's a really decadent and, important way, I think, to set aside time out of everyday life to go on these retreats. And what I love, though, too, is in the back of your book, you have an idea on how to do a DIY one, right? So how to even,
yes.
We don't have to go to some exotic locale, even though that is fun and fabulous, but that doesn't work for everyone. So
it doesn't. I think about especially, younger women who are raising a family and working and juggling so many things. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the DIY chapter is I think, they can take a day, right? They can get their support system and take a day and have something really affordable and really go into themselves and make it matter.
Yes, share a few tips to do that with our listeners, if you would, on how to set up your own kind of personal retreat.
Yeah, I think it would start with carving out a day where you can, like I said, if you're if you're a mother or if you're raising children or whatever, you need to make sure that you have the space to actually do this. So that means everyone in your life kind of getting on board and helping you be able to go away for a full day and take this time for yourself. So it's a day of deep replenishment is how I would categorize it. And it's really going to help you show up in your own life. And I think that especially women, we need to find ways to replenish ourselves that are practical as well as, like you said, exotic. If you can go away to a fabulous retreat, that's wonderful, but not everyone can do that. So I think that the way that I would say the quickest way to go into a DIY retreat would be to carve out that day. And then once you're there, I would really start with just taking a nice long nap and getting yourself into that relaxed place so that you can let your anxieties just sort of rest. And then I would say there's got to be some element of nature involved. So if you can go outside and walk in woods or just be quiet in your breathing in the woods, on a trail, anything that has to do with allowing yourself to have space away from screens and phones and people, obligation, responsibility. Then I love the idea of on a DIY retreat with someone just being completely by themselves, that they can really focus on how they're eating and how they're actually tasting their food. So you know how we rush through our meals, right? So a beautiful, nurturing quality on a DIY retreat would be what am I going to cook for myself? How do I want to nurture myself? And how am I going to actually receive that nurturing? So it's like you're really savoring your food. And you can tell when you're full, you can tell when it's enough, and you can actually taste the food. So I think that's huge for women especially. And you can journal about it too. You can ask yourself, which part of this process of me connecting to eating and food did I really feel great about? What did I notice about myself? Where did my habits come up? What was positive? What was negative? What would I like to change? Then I would say for most people that we're doing a day retreat, there would be some element of body movement. Either it depends on if you're an athletic person, you may want to go for a run or maybe just a simple walk or maybe a really gentle yoga practice. And I think the elements of food movement, space, kind of set up the foundation for then later in the day. This is where I would suggest getting into deeper inner work and meditation, lighting candles, being really quiet, and just really being with self. And then perhaps going into some journal writing about that.
Yeah, I love that. And the thing is too, even if listeners can carve out an hour, like once a week or here and there, in order to have a mini experience of this, it can be so incredibly therapeutic.
I agree. And I think any way to nourish ourselves, even in small little bits, like I love this idea of daily retreat. Just what about if you could figure out how to take 15 or 20 minutes extra every day where you're just completely focused on that nourishing, replenishing self-care? And sometimes I'll suggest to people, why don't we wake up a little bit earlier? And at first that might seem like, oh no, I really need my sleep. I really love my sleep. But I think over time, getting up earlier can actually be a really beautiful thing, because if you can get up before the whole house gets up and just have, light the candle, create the intention, and just have that moment or those moments where the sun is coming up. I've really gotten into that practice myself in the last few years, and I just find it to be so ideal for me to just be by myself as the sun comes up. I just love it.
It's also lovely when the sun goes down.
Yeah.
So let's chat Italy. So you've got a thing for Italy.
I do have a thing for Italy. Excuse me. I'm getting over a little cold. Yeah, I do. I started going to Italy, oh my gosh, 25 years ago. And I just immediately fell in love with Italy to the point where I actually realized that I've probably in another lifetime lived in Italy or been part of Italy in some way. Because when I first came to Italy and walked on Italy's soil, I just felt like I was coming home. And I felt like the time in my life when I first started going to Italy was so nurturing for me. And I was sort of on this rat race lifestyle where I was really wired and a little anxious. And when I came to Italy, I felt like I could just sort of rest in Mama Italy's arms. It just felt really nourishing for me. And then I kept coming back. I just wanted to go back again and again and again. And then I finally realized that I wanted to bring people there and share this with them. And then I found my places in Tuscany. So I have 2 different locations in Tuscany. One is a castle, and one is an all women owned and operated winery. So it's got this really fabulous energy. And I bring people to retreats to remember their dreams.
And can you pinpoint what it is about Italy? So I've got something similar with France, right?
Yeah.
And so, sometimes it's just people ask, well, what is it? What is it about Paris? Or what is it about Tuscany? And so can you encapsulate it?
I think Italy helps people, like I said, they remember their dreams again. I think a lot of times people get a little bit older and they just sort of, life can be a little joyless. And it's the vibe in Italy with the beautiful food and just the art and the spirit of the Italian people. It captivates people and it helps them remember the essence of life, which is joy and pleasure. So it's kind of like this sort of je ne sais quoi. Now I'm using a French term to describe something in Italy. It's magical. It's soul replenishing. And it's just typically what people will say to the end of every single retreat I've ever hosted. They will say that it was a moment of transformation. Coming to Italy, they will literally say it changed their life. And then if I say, how did it change your life? What happened? Well, I remembered myself and I remembered my joy and I remembered my desires, and they make changes in their life. They go home and they actually make huge changes in their life.
Yeah, it's what's really interesting, I think, about retreating in general is there, we come up, we get so fired up, so to speak, with regard to changes we want to make or, shifts or what have you. And we're so in the moment. And then what can be tricky is to keep that up when we get home. Because we go home and there's diapers to be changed or dogs to be walked or plants to be watered, groceries to be picked up, whatever it is. And have you figured out a way to encourage people to keep that retreat with them?
Yeah, I mean, I hear exactly what you're saying. It's all about how am I going to integrate? And I feel like that as a yoga teacher is something that you can relate to, I'm sure, as well, which is how do you, it's like when you teach a yoga class, everyone is so there. It's so beautiful. There's just this hour and a half moment in time, and then they leave, right? They have to go back to life. And it's how do you take the yoga off the mat and into real life? To me, it's a practice. And so the way that I encourage people when they get home from Italy is, I write books. So I'm trying to find ways within my own work to extend it out after the retreat. I think that it's not just you come on my retreat and now I say goodbye and we never talk again. I try to encourage people to realize that what they discovered on the retreat is something that they can keep going through their own self-care practices. And so they may not be able to go to Italy every year to remember who they are, but they're getting a spark and they're getting inspired. And so I feel like it does sort of carry through in different ways. People share with me for months on end different things they're doing, classes they're taking, ways they change their work, things that shifted in their relationships. So I think it can be quite lovely, but yeah, it's not always easy, is it, for people when they come home?
No, it's a big shock to the system, because you're so surrounded by such great energy and people on a similar path or what have you. And then you go home and you're like back to reality. It's tough.
I think that's where just the art of practice. I mean, isn't it all just practice? It's like, no matter what we do, whenever we're getting inspired, whether it be Italy or Paris or art or love or food or whatever it is, we ultimately do have to come back to, as the Buddhists would say, the dukkha, which is just the bummer moments. And so the more that we can, though, keep kind of opening those windows to joy, pleasure, loving kindness, I think it gets to a point where the practice keeps it alive. And the more you practice, the more the window opens.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great reminder because sometimes, with practice in general, it can be like, well, I'm meditating once a week or I'm writing my journal once a week or, I'm going to yoga once a week and I don't see any changes or, I don't see the results. And, the idea that really it's a regular practice and, daily life is our ability to practice all these tools, in traffic and, at home with family. It's not when we're on retreat and everything's pretty idyllic, Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's also helping people understand what is retreat and what, obviously daily life. We all know what that is, but what is retreat and how can I take those snippets and those little moments and bring them into my daily life a little bit more?
Right. Absolutely. And my last question for you, Jane, is the name of this podcast is Tranquility du Jour. So I'm curious, besides, I'm sure, loving kindness, but how do you find tranquility in your everyday?
I love that question. Well, I love everything you do, by the way. I think it's totally inspiring. I am a really old lady. I've been doing this a really long time now. And I just recently turned 60. And so the ways that I approached self-care, wellness, and loving kindness in my 40s and even my 50s feel really different than they do for me right now. I've reached a time where I just feel like it's all precious. And I'm at that age now where I have friends that have passed away and lots of family members. I don't feel like I have time to waste is how I feel. So it's kind of like Pema Chodron's practice like your hair's on fire. I say no time to lose. And I guess that's really just where I'm at right now. There's something really big that's shifted in me in the last 2 or 3 years where a lot of the things that troubled me when I was a younger woman don't trouble me anymore. And I think it is that number, maybe that feeling that it really is quite precious here, even in the midst of all the dukkha. And I just want to savor the goodness and hold on to it as much as I can.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much, Jane.
You're so welcome. It was super fun.
Savvy Sources. There's a link to find Jane over at Radiant Jane. And then also Facebook and Instagram. So you'll find these over in the show notes. KimberlyWilson.com/453. Also, there's a link to Pigs and Pugs Project that was mentioned earlier in the podcast. There's also a link to my brand new book. Okay, it came out in January. It's 4 months old, but still, Year of Tranquility, which comes with 5 bonuses. So you can find a link to that in the show notes or KimberlyWilson.com/YOT. You can find me over on Instagram and Facebook, and then I'm doing new videos on YouTube, including my latest, which was Tea with Kimberly and all about what I'm reading. And I'll put a link to that also in the show notes because hopefully that would be a fun thing for you to watch and enjoy. And I hope to be doing these semi-regularly, so look for those. There's also a link to Tranquility, my locally sewn, eco-friendly fashion line, my 6 books, e-courses, the podcast app, and read about my passion for animals. And finally, if you have a moment to pin a review or share this podcast via social media, would be so grateful. And let us know what you've learned today about loving kindness and more. Also, if you have a moment to pin a review of any of my books on Amazon or Goodreads, would be most grateful. Thank you as always for tuning in, and I wish you a delightful, delightful week ahead. Namaste.